Interesting topic, eh? The relation or correlation of domestic violence to crimes with firearms. Weapons. Let's just say weapons, right? The act of the use of a weapon. That's what it is. It's not a gun. It's not against the Second Amendment. We're just going to derive, as John Stewart says, just the statistical analysis and correlation of domestic violence. We need to study domestic violence. Well, he says statistically, then, good men versus bad men. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. There's more bad than the good, and usually it's always the same damn thing. Hypocrisy consumes us all. Fine. Let's ignore the philosophy. We're gonna analyze what I believe John Stewart's weakness is. So, I'm not calling him out. No, I'm not doing that. What I am saying is that it said in his article, the good guys are going to stop the bad guys, but most of the time that's not true. So we remove guns. So now we have domestic violence. People are not allowed to be angry. They're not allowed to feel emotions. They are not allowed to analyze situations. They're not allowed, say me, who encounters aggravated people all the time. I know how to fight, so, well, I'm a little overweight now, but I can still handle myself, and I can think adequately during a situation. So, the other day, I'm in a parking lot, and this guy, in Colorado, we have the, what do they call it? The right of way. There you go. The right of way is to the driver in the parking lot. The person within a parking space does not have the right of way. In Texas, I don't know what it is. But this guy had a Texas license plate. So he's pulling out, and I go around. But then he pulls left, and I just keep going. Because he's supposed to give me the right of way. Well, he starts honking at me. Brr, 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 and he's like stopping, going. Just kind of crazy, neurotic sort of shit. And I'm just watching this. So we get to the point where then he, like, blatantly turns left in front of me. Okay. He did take a left turn. He didn't have a blinker on. But, you know, that was enough for me to not keep going. He then rolls down his window. He's honking. He's flipping me off. Anyway. Domestic violence, right? So this ability to analyze the situation and understand the difference, this has nothing to do with weak men, good men versus bad men. Men have the right to feel emotions. And with this argument that guns, which is no different than a sword or whatever else throughout time, a fucking sling or a slingshot, that if you're going to create a society of men who are incapable of using a gun to defend against the bad people, let's say just instigating crime, the instigators of crime, right? That we have this paradox too. I read another article that a cop, off-duty officer, went out and he shot 2 would-be carjackers in the back. Well, as far as I know, if you do catch criminals, that the penalty for carjacking or breaking and entering or robbery in general of a car is not warranted the death penalty, right? So there's a paradox there. So now we have these men that run away and he shoots them in the back. Well, they did not commit attempted murder. I mean, how many times are you going to let men run away until they do actually succeed in murdering you? But that's where the game of Go comes into play, right? Go is kind of designed around that. And I'm sorry, I'm off track. Anyway, so the paradox of that is that stand your ground allows you to defend your property, life or death. If men are willing to harm you for your property, you have the right to stand your ground and defend your property. Otherwise, you are going to remove yourself and they can take your property or whatever else, right? The whole stand your ground thing is that you are going to be there with your property because you are the same substance as your property. And so if they are stealing your substance, then they are stealing your life. And as such, you have the right to defend both. At least that's how I see it. And that's the rationality behind it. And so when you look at other people defending each other's property, that makes everybody really strong, right? But stand your ground does not defend the right to execute a would-be criminal who otherwise backed up to as well. Just as the criminal chases you, if you chase the criminal, it's the same thing, right? So you don't execute a criminal by shooting them in the back. That's very complicated for the average person to understand, I think, at least. So men who have guns, well, we train with them. We understand their value. We analyze them. I can even I've designed my own guns. I haven't got to build them, but they're not very complicated. I like working on them. It's a pleasure. That's a side note. Just as me, as somebody who sees them in the same state as an adult toy, just as much as a Hot Wheels car is to, a Ferrari or a Porsche. It's a track toy. So you even call them that in the automotive industry now. They have track toys. So you pay to these places to go use them. But it takes away our rights to enjoy the roads that are actually good. And then just do the same thing over and over in a circle. So with Jon Stewart, these men, these good men who don't know how to act in a moment, if we simply just take away guns, we leave knives, or we leave muscle and brute force, it's always just the same derivative of vulnerability and weakness, that men who don't know how to act in the moment, be it domestic violence or not, are they going to run around and assess everybody's emotional instabilities and now all of a sudden victimize anybody for having any sense of passion or aggression, or maybe they speak a little bit differently, or if I get a little bit more aggressive and I start talking like this, or I do things like that, or whatever else, body language, this or that, it's always just a downward slope into a less critical analysis that the warrior bloodlines tend to actually have. And so men like me who don't feel the need to escalate a situation, who can actually handle the tension and know how to de-escalate, I don't always have to win. So maybe that does make me weaker in that sense, that I don't know how to act in that moment. But anyway, are we making a weaker society is what I'm trying to ask. Is if you're going to perform on that and give these men the opportunity, who are already victimized, who don't know how to use a weapon for their self-defense, which makes them superior in a physical sense, and you don't know how to analyze the situation in general to know how to act, aren't you just making a weaker society overall? Just repetitively, accumulatively, like a cumulative interest rate, or what do you do? Well, one, it's very intrinsic to the cultures at hand too, as well. How you're raised. It's a very complex society. You can't simply just bring in endless amounts of people who have not acclimated naturally to your... think how many generations it took, and how many millennia, and how many people it took just to write the Constitution to get to the point where we found a new world, and we come to this place, and then we fight ourselves, and we rationalize the laws of free will. In a way, they didn't know what to call it that, but then we're upholding just this desire of all these other cultures to simply be other places or have power or money, and violating laws of free will. If you understand them properly, you'll understand that, and that these cultures don't necessarily acclimate to it naturally, and that's what's led to the downfall of so many historical civilizations that have found naturally this higher sense of intellectual society that is in consideration of neighbor for thy neighbor and neighbor thy neighbor. And like I said with the cop, defending your neighbors, that makes a really strong society. But should we be executing people, or can we better them and actually change people? I don't know. That's always a little funny too, right? So, the Constitution, every time I've ever analyzed it and criticized it, has been perfect. It really is. It's... some of the bills are a little... actually, the later ones, not the actual Constitutional Bill of Rights. The later ones get a little weird. But it's just... they need a power balance because people are very one-sided. They're hemispherical. And so, just in that right, and this is why I always say the greater good is always the lesser good, is that just because you're hemispherical here, you still have another half of your brain that you have to consider. And when you're considering that other half, the greater good here becomes the lesser good, because then you're using your entire fucking cognitive potential. At least that's the best way I've ever put it. Just some things to think about. Don't be ignorant.